Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the distinguished speakers for joining. It gives us a great privilege and pleasure having Women Leaders Roundtable. In fact, we have been having from the GWFM, this is around fifth year that, we are having this. This is a virtual one. In fact, we had done few of them face-to-face where we have witnessed Grace, who's physically present here in Bangalore, and she was one of the awardees from GWFM years back. And Women's Day is not celebrated on, like particular day that, like 8th of March. The Women's Day is celebrated every day. And we really respect kind of corporate governance, which they're really having kind of leadership is tremendous and amazing. The women leaders are perfect fit for HR and WFM. No other than them can drive the business forward, and they're the right people. They're the right leaders to drive the business forward. And we have the right people here at the right time, at the right place. So from GWFM, we welcome all the distinguished women leaders who are here. It really gives us a great privilege and pleasure having all of you. We thought of a theme, define diversity and inclusion in the workplace. This is a much needed topic. A lot of them talking about it on the social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, and multiple other forums. So today we're going to listen to the leaders right from, like bottom of their heart and their experiences and kind of insights that, they're going to share is not going to be available anywhere in the social media. So we're going to record this, and this is going to be made available for people who are not attending today. This is going to be something very important, and going to have a huge takeaways from this session. Thank you so much for taking time out to join in. Really appreciate Nairi from Australia, and Francia from Philippines, and Grace, Krupa, Dipti, and we have a Priya. So with this, thank you so much for taking your valuable time out from the office service and joining in, and your valuable insights and experiences are going to be great useful to the audience, the HR or the WFM or operations. Entire industry is going to be benefited from your insights and kind of experience. With this, thank you so much for taking your time out. Welcome you to GWFM Leadership Roundtable. With this, we have a distinguished leader, Deepti Rishi. She has worked in more than 4 to 5 companies, all well known. Recently, she was in Taskus as CHRO, and now she is moving into another company very soon. She has played a very key role and one of the great leaders to set an example. She's going to moderate a session today with us. Welcome, Deepti, for taking your time out, and a privilege to have you with us along with other distinguished leaders. Yeah. With this, welcome all the participants. If any of you have any questions, you can type in the chat box. We will look at it and we'll answer before we end the session. Thank you. Welcome again. Over to you, Deepti.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shiva. I think when you know about what you've done all your life, it's just part of life, right? But when you hear it from somebody else, you suddenly say, "Oh my God, that's a long experience," and suddenly makes you feel a little old as well. But just to introduce myself again, 22 years in HR. Very passionate about diversity and inclusion. I've worked with brands like Genpact, Aeon, and also a diverse industry, which is media and advertising, Dentsu. And my last stint was with Taskus. I took a break for about a couple of months, trying to kind of rediscover myself and rechart the path that I want to take next. And I'll be starting off with my next stint in another month's time. Diversity and inclusion, like I said, is I'm passionate about it, like I'm sure most of you are. But in a slightly different, I have a slightly different take on it as well. While I feel that we do a lot to bring up people from diverse backgrounds to a level playing path. Somewhere I feel that being neutral rather than talking about just equality makes is a different kind of conversation that we need to have, and that's one of the things that I would like to talk about during the session, which is gender neutrality and neutral playing field for anybody from a diverse background. But from where we started many years ago to be really conscious about diversity in the first place, and then first to be conscious about diversity, and then to talk about inclusion, and of course now the new word of equity is a huge journey that the corporate world has taken in itself. But I do feel that the playing field or the landscape of our corporate scenarios has changed drastically from where we started to where we are today. In some sectors, the change is visible, and you can see the changes happening ground up. In many sectors, in many industries, we feel, at least from where I stand, I see that we have a long distance to still cover. But the point is that as an as a corporate sector, as wherever we are working, the consciousness of diversity and inclusion is very evident. So let's start with talking about the landscape in itself. Over many years, let's say over the last many decades, the entire landscape has changed as far as diversity and inclusion is concerned. I remember the first time I heard this quote, that diversity is the head count and inclusion is making the heads count. Very interesting play of words. This was in Aeon way back in 2018, and it kind of stuck with me throughout, and I continuously use it wherever I go unabashedly. I think that awakening in itself, that what is diversity, what is inclusion, and why is it important, that for me has changed drastically. But let's start the discussion with the fact that how do we feel the diversity landscape has changed over the years? And in your opinion, what do you think has led to this change, right? So let's start with Krupa. I just from the fact that you were the first person to join in. So let's hear from you.
Sure, wonderful. Been in the industry for over 2 decades now, and spent all my time in HR. Joined in by chance, but loved it by choice over a period of time. New things to learn, and working with people has been phenomenal over the years, especially from my own self-growth perspective. And thank you, GWFM, today for this opportunity for us to, have this conversation. I'm sure while the month of March comes in, as Shiva rightly said, it's just not about a day or a month, but it's a practice that we look forward to celebrating each day. And coming to your question, Deepthi, I think we are slowly, at least me as an HR person, from my own self-evolvement of the whole thing of diversity. We used to first call it diversity, then came in diversity and inclusion. Then we spoke about diversity, equality, inclusion, then diversity, equity, inclusion. Now diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness. So I'm just telling, this is the kind of landscape that we're changing. The reason being, that's the kind of mood that is set with the kind of people, the culture that is coming in, the kind of diversity that we are coming is just not about demographics or just the heads, as you very rightly said. So for me, at least personally, from the time to have, good to have, nice to have, and a must have is a situation that we have moved the path. Because I'm sure from an organizational perspective, it's not about being left behind in the race, but we are going to miss out on an opportunity of getting that kind of talent if we are people who can't inculcate it into the value system. So anything that's thrust upon, I'm sure over a period of time, tick in the box, good to have, but then it's going to die unless otherwise it sits into our value, we adapt and inculcate it. So from that perspective, the kind of what's the charter for your organization? That's so important. This whole nice to have, good to have, we have a set of things that we work. It's not going to take us anywhere because what fits one organization may just not fit the other. Can we not try and boil the ocean, but take the charter for your organization, have the structure, identify the gaps, and from that perspective, start small but sustain it, which is what is going to probably drive us with some incredible respect from our own employees. And that's what is going to probably make us more successful and something that is in the long run, whether it's to do with, the kind of programs, the whole reward and recognition programs for people, the kind of platforms you're using, the kind of tools, the training. Most important, how is your leadership really driving it? Is it more an HR charter versus an organizational charter that we want to bring it in, so that we start with, it's just not about, oh, we want to be fair, but show it through actions, which is where I think is going to get us considerable credibility. And I'm sure over the last, at least I would say 8 to 10 years, we've seen it evolve slowly. We are definitely not there because this situation happened over years of time. I'm sure improving it or trying to change everything is equally going to take us that much more time. And that's how I would say, in short, we are moving ahead with the kind of charter we are set for ourselves. But the whole buy-in from the 360-degree people around you is something that's going to make it more successful.
Yeah. Yeah, you bring up very important points of take small things but sustain. I think where we fail as organizations is that we want to do everything, and whatever the new buzz is, let's get after that, and we must do it, right? And that's where it's a sustenance is a problem from that. But also what you bring about is that first and foremost is the awareness of the fact that, is diversity really important? What's wrong with just having one kind of people doing the job? We know what we need to get done, but in the bargain we lose out on such crucial talent. And I really appreciate that thought as well. So let's move on to Nairi. I mean, it's an entire different geography and a different perspective. So how does this work, Nairi, for you? How do you see the landscape changing?
So I think it's really important that we recognise that the work is continuous and will never actually finish. It'll always be something that we need to focus on to make sure that we have diverse and inclusive workplaces. And I do really appreciate your quote, which I'm definitely using, regarding diversity is the head count and inclusion is making the heads count. This year's International Women's Theme in Australia was around equity. So similar to what Krupa mentioned or alluded to just before, equality is important, but equity is that difference between making sure that the equal opportunities suit the individual. So it's not just about giving everybody the same thing to make sure that it's equal. It's making sure that you give everybody the same tools and resources that they need in order to create that equity. So there's definitely a lot of conversation happening and a lot of positive progress happening to make sure that we are tailoring the opportunities to suit the individual rather than a one-size-fits-all solution, as you've already mentioned. So yeah, it's a changing landscape. It will always be changing, and it will always be something that we need to continue to have the conversation so that the progress doesn't move backwards.
Yeah, and good point about equity, that are we giving the same kind of resources to everyone to come forward? And while we are doing that, I later in the conversation, I do want to have a conversation about reverse bias as well, because that's a point that I have a little bit of a concern about, and we'll talk more about this. But one of the pieces that both of you have said, that the awareness that diversity is important, inclusion is important. I remember when we started off, everything was centered around women. We need equality for women, and then equality became equal opportunity. And however, everything was still centered all around women for a good couple of decades. When I look at diversity and inclusion now in the corporate world, you will see a lot of different facets of the society getting more included in the way we look at DEI, right? So when we look at people with disabilities, now to call somebody disabled was a big no-no. But PWD as a term has become a very common and a very accepted word to be used, and for us to have strategies around inclusion of PWD, right, which is people with disabilities. So let's talk about whether in the changing landscape, do we really understand the meaning of inclusion? I'll give you an example, which was such a painful experience for me. In what I'm not naming the organization, but in one of the organizations, a female CEO is the one that I was dealing with. And we were trying to finalize some candidates for a senior position. The point that she made was, let's look for women who are single, or who have who are divorced or something like that. Let's look for women like that. And my first reaction was, oh, how nice that you would want to give opportunities to women who are trying to become financially independent. But immediately, in continuation with this, she said, because they don't have all the problem of family, kids, mother-in-law, you have to go here, all of that. They're on their own and they can do whatever they want. And I was like, that really isn't the basis of deciding that we should take in single women, right? Similarly, there was from the same person, and this is a woman that I'm talking about. There was again a comment for somebody who was going through a medical issue, who wanted a certain sabbatical, and she said, why should I give sabbatical? This lady is just going to come back, get pregnant, and then I have to give maternity leave. And we do have diversity and inclusion strategy, right? Where we're talking about giving women equal opportunity and all of that stuff. But there is this conversation also going on as an undercurrent. So is this whole DEI piece just a tick in the box? Are we doing it for social media to show numbers that this is happening and we are doing it? Whereas in our core, we still don't have the real feeling for DEI. That's my next question. So let's start with Grace.
Thank you, Dipti. And a quick introduction about myself. I lead the HR function for Informatica, a data management company. We build products to enable, our clients move from data chaos to data clarity, right? That's what we help, our clients do. And been with Informatica for about 5 years, but in the HR space for about 28 years now. And thoroughly enjoy being here. Thanks for the opportunity. And yes, let me just quickly jump into your question, right? In terms of are we really being inclusive in the true sense, right? Now, touching a little bit about on your previous question, have we moved in terms of how the landscape has changed? Yes, we have, and pretty strongly, I would say, because now there is definitely a sense of, looking at the benefits of being diverse, right? Likewise, people are realizing the benefits of being inclusive, right, in the organization. Now, is that really enough that we are doing as of now? The answer is no, right? Inclusion these days, if you look at it, is not a one-time event or an episode or a project, but it's an ongoing goal for most organizations, right? It's never a goal which says it's a 2023 goal, but it's an ongoing goal for the organization, for leaders and everybody, right? Now, for most of the top management, if I have to bifurcate it a little bit, they do realize the need for inclusion, because when we're really looking at every intervention, like say Krupa talked about earlier, whether it's rewards and recognition, any kind of employee welfare, etc., we've consciously as an organization looked at, are we being fair? Are we being equitable? Are we really being, there is always a parity check that we do, right? And that really has helped organizations realize that the more we are inclusive, right, not just diverse, but the more we are inclusive, the benefits that we reap as the organization, reaps, is far superior than our prior state of affairs, right? And that is helping senior leadership, the CFOs, the CEOs realize that inclusion is the way forward and not just a media thing, right? However, like you rightly pointed out, do we really experience it in the true sense at the ground level, at the first line manager level, on the floor, right? Not as much of realization, right? We got to continue on this journey. And of course, we may have had many thousands of such roundtables, right? Panel discussions all over the world. But trust me, it's helping in some sense where, when people listen to it, it's a assurance that organizations are heading in the right direction. And we got to do more of inclusion, right? So to your point, we've kind of evolved from diversity and inclusion just being a HR initiative to business driving this, right? However, is it really percolating down effectively? There's a lot more work to do there, right? That's really my take on, do we really feel inclusive? Of course, all of us in HR feel very passionate about it, and we do, but what will really work the trick is when leaders start realizing it at every level. Right now, I think it's kind of top down, but does it reach to the first line manager level and hit the ground really, is a question that I'm still pondering over.
Yeah, and that's a good question to think about, because while at the leadership level we may have very strong understanding of what diversity and inclusion is and how it's beneficial, the lower down still think that as you go down the chain, wrong usage of words there, but as you go down the chain, it's really, I need to get my work done, and what's the best way of doing it, more than all this is, it's good in the books.
Yeah.
So yes, where we make this a core value for us, I think that is the crux of diversity and inclusion and the success. Francia, let's hear from you about this topic.
Sure. But first, let me introduce myself. I'm the head of the contact center in Mandalife Business Processing Services in the Philippines, and I'm also the executive sponsor of Global Women's Alliance in our company. So I'm glad to be part of today's Women's Leadership Forum, and to meet great women leaders in different industries. So thank you, Shiva, for organizing this event. I'll start with, I know that you also shared this earlier, your experience. So my journey as a female leader wasn't all sweets and roses. I've also experienced microaggression in the workplace, and those encounters try tried to derail me as a leader, but it wasn't. It was those that really shaped and strengthened my sense of purpose and pride in women empowerment. Now, to answer your question earlier, I would say I'm very positive that in today's corporate world, there is understanding of the real meaning of inclusion. You know, some organizations are really focused on more inclusive culture to really attract and retain a wider, diverse talent in their organizations. And because inclusion enables us to do things differently, working in ways that really suits our employees, whether in flex working patterns or environment, to ensure that there's work-life balance. It's really delivering best results in most of the organization. And going back to the acceptance, that most companies are now accepting that inclusion is really essential as a future-proof. But there are also challenges, and the gaps I've seen in some boils down around communication, unconscious bias. There's lack of trust. There's that trying to tick every box. There's also discrimination in some, and the lack of buy-in in the senior leaders in the organization. But at the end of the day, improving inclusion in the workplace, like most of our women leaders mentioned in this meeting, it's an ongoing task, and we need people to become comfortable of expressing themselves, that we need them to make them feel that it is a safe environment or a safe workplace. And the most important thing for me is to actively take an action, to have an inclusive organization and to create a safe place for people to be their most authentic selves.
That's absolutely quite in line with what we've all been talking. And to your point that it's been a tough journey in places where you felt aggression. I empathize for what you've had to undergo and yet achieve so much. I, for one, have been lucky where I've been in organizations where your gender really did not matter, and it was more to do with what you bring to the table. So that's been I think I've been fortunate in that way. But let's also go on to Priya to hear her views on this. Priya, over to you.
Sure, thank you, Deepti. I think since I joined last, so I get the last opportunity. I'm just kidding. Firstly, let me introduce myself, Priya Venkatraman. I have over about 23 years of worked in different companies. I head the HR function for Indian Software Technologies Private Limited. We are spreading ourselves in a global company. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. I think it's indeed a great pleasure to be part of different women leaders, and also to hear some of the best practices and learn from each other. So I think that way, thanks to Deepti and Dr. Shiva to help us come together as a team. I think women force are very powerful, and I think each one of us play a very different role in our ways. So to coming to your question, Deepti, inclusion by itself, a definition means inclusive at workplace, right? Things have changed from, like what Kripa and Grace mentioned, that from diversity, from the gender perspective to today, we're talking about being inclusive, from being equity and inclusiveness and belongingness. And I think the DEIB is getting expanded day by day, in a way that every thing is being stressed out very clearly. What does it mean for diversity? What does it mean for inclusion? So for me, if you look at it from an organization perspective, inclusive is very important on three aspects. I think one is how do you respect people? I think that's the fundamental that everybody looks at workplace, in terms of am I being respectable in the way that I express my thoughts, in the way that I express my views, which is very, very important. The number two is, am I, being able to have a platform where I can speak my mind? That is something that I think everybody wants to hear about their views and concerns, and are they being heard enough? Are they being listened to? And I think it can't be just like by the definition or the survey or the report that says, you know what, we are an inclusive organization, we do this, that. I'm sure as all the leaders, the HR leaders that we are today, that is part of our KRA or the objective or the top line that we have to drive for the organization. But I think it's more towards what they've been feeling. I think the perception versus reality, the experience versus reality is what something that most of the employees, and especially after this COVID, things have changed very drastically and what they're looking for, right? And the third one is more about treating them fair. I think that is also equally important, because they look at am I being treated fair when I'm, when it comes to let's say anything with regards to promotion or change in my role, so on and so forth. I think these are something which is very important from an inclusion perspective. And I like what Grace mentioned. It's there in the top, but it's actually, is it percolated down, is something that a bigger question that all of us, so all of us as leaders, we want to demonstrate those behaviors. We ensure that, things like this, right? Being mindful when you're in a call. There might be somebody who can't speak Tamil, somebody can speak Hindi, somebody can speak the other language, right? But are we conscious enough that the rest of the folks doesn't understand? Are we talking in a common language, being inclusive, and giving? And there will always be these folks who wants to grab the limelight, keep on talking, and will not give the chance for the rest of the folks, giving an ad time for everybody. So I think those are all small behaviors which we as an organization have made it, hey, before start of the meeting, call up those inclusive meeting behaviors and say, give a chance for everybody to talk. Just don't, I'm sure everybody has a viewpoint for what they have to talk about and express, but I think it's important that we give a chance to everybody. So those small changes are very important, and that can be demonstrated. And I think one thing which I strongly believe, Deepti, is the perception versus reality is very, very important. What is the feeling? Am I feeling the same thing that I'm being told, or it is just that survey or the report or the assessment that goes in? I think if we are able to do that, I'm sure we will be able to achieve what we want to achieve as an organization. Those are my 2 cents.
Yeah. Now, you bring up a very good point about perception versus reality. And I think in a lot of ways, when we are trying to even solve for things that are not going right, or things that we strongly believe in, somewhere we get so overly eager to solve for those that we forget about how it's going to get perceived versus the reality that we're really trying to help. And again, I'll bring out an example here, and this is something I heard from somebody else. They'd set up a new facility, and they still did not have gender neutral bathrooms or washrooms. And, we had they had a transgender employee who asked his manager, which loo am I supposed to use, right? And the person, because we have to be very conscious of the fact, and we have to help them, and we have to be very conscious of inclusion and everything. They said, oh, we have a handicap bathroom, you can use that, which is gender neutral. And back came the reply, but I'm not handicapped. And while the manager was desperately trying to help and say and problem solve, it's how we are putting that across. And that brings into the point that our first thought was that, why did you even have to solve for it? It could have just been brought out to the manager and to the management, and I'm sure there would have been a solution that they would have thought of. But again, to everybody's point, that while we all understand the importance of it, how it goes down, and we're trying desperately to help. We are trying desperately to be more inclusive, but are we fully equipped? Maybe yes, may not be. So more towards that. I do want to welcome Camille at this point. Camille, I guess you had mentioned you'd be joining a little late. Why don't we start with a question that we have here from the audience. We have Mayank who's posed a question. I believe that the focus on strategic resource management has increased, like it was in the early 60s. People and resources are only going to be a differentiator and one of the major reasons for organizations' success. This focus has increased post-COVID. Do you see this as a reason why organizations are also focusing on resources and their interests, or do we see this happening because of a global push and pressure? Rather hard-hitting question there. Thanks, Mayank, for that. And to say that during COVID, we've really recognized the importance of humans and humans as resources, right? The ability for us to adapt and move on, I think that's one of the biggest things that we've learned in COVID. So to say that our concentration on resources, other than everything, may not be the focus for most organizations right now. And Grace, you wanted to answer that. Can I ask you to step in here?
Sure, thank you. So I think, first of all, I personally feel very comfortable calling humans resources, right? However, to this question that Mayank has, yes, post-COVID, I think there has been a huge focus on this whole talent war, right? I mean, in terms of ensuring that the best of the breed are really staying within the organization. A lot of organizations rolled out multiple retention kind of initiatives. You saw, the talent market really going haywire in terms of offers being as lucrative as possible, right? 80% increases from their current job role, etc., right? And of course, we talked about the great resignation and then, silent quitting and a lot of stuff that happened really, right? And now I think we are at a state where, companies are indeed looking at not so much volumes, but optimizing, right? Optimizing this diverse pool. At least I can speak for Informatica, where we really are not in this whole number game. We are looking at, because we've also realized post-COVID, a lot of optimization can be done. We also looked at the lean methodology to say, eliminate all waste activities, eliminate things that are not critical, right? Focus only on stuff that needs to get done for big business outcome and business impact, right? And that's really why I think most organizations are looking at optimization. Personally, to me, I don't think it is because of pressure or push, a global push. I definitely think it's because if organizations have to sustain, one, they got to be diverse, the other, they got to be inclusive, but more importantly, optimize as well, right? And when they kind of optimize, the benefits are very obvious, and you're going to be staying in the game for much longer than you anticipated, right? So that's from me, Deepti.
Yeah, and that does make a lot of sense. When we talk about optimization and Mike, I hope that answers your question. And to just move on with the flow of the conversation, when we talk about optimization, a lot of things also are dependent on how we are growing our talent. So what we have and what we need, can we grow this talent to what we need rather than going outside and acquiring more talent, right? So is that the way to go is one of the things. We talk a lot about a certain percentage of women, PWD, all of that at certain levels in the organization. But what are we doing really to bring that talent to that level? Are we hiring right at the grassroots level? Unless we hire at that level and make sure that we are grooming them to take on bigger, higher responsibilities, why should they stay with you? Why will you have people who at the top go with the strategy that you have of DEI? So here's the next question that I have to the panel, and we'll start with Camille. That what are the steps that we can take as organizations to grow this inclusive culture? One, of course, that has a whole lot of this thing. But when we are talking about having more people included in our organization, what are the things we can do to grow them, to ensure that once we have the base, we are helping them grow with the organization, and it's not just numbers, but it's an actual growth that they see with us.
Right. Thank you, everyone. Sorry, I joined in late. I was having some technical issues, so I'm just gonna try to introduce myself for a while. So I'm Camille Javier. I'm the head for Global WFM at Cognizant, right? So to answer the question, to me, it's actually a balance between hiring the right skill and upskilling and honing the current ones that we already have, right? So in Cognizant, in WFM specifically, we have launched our L&D Academy, right, where we actually align in-house courses that are available. We pitch in outsourced skills and training and techs for people depending on the upskilling metrics that they needed to have for the core skills that they needed to hone and develop, right? And then I guess for women as leadership also is for us to be also visible. So one is visibility, one is creating an impact, three is taking an action, right? So those three important things is needed to be considered for everyone, specifically for women, right? We have to be visible for us to be seen. So when I was watching one of the speeches, right, preparing for this panel, so there was one story that was said about so she was a women leader and she was pitching in on a corporate business table. So she was the only women at the time, right? And then after 2 hours of pitching in and whatnot, they had to go on bio break. So everyone stood up and then she was like, okay, where is the women bathroom? Connecting to Dipti about the bathroom issue. And then that business actually has been established for already a year, but okay, so does that mean there's no women using the bathroom? Or probably she was the first one who used the bathroom, but really being visible, sitting on the table, giving out your ideas, making them know that, okay, though I'm a woman, I'm a lady, I have a lot of things I can pitch in and contribute to the company. And then two is creating an impact. If you see something that needs to be changed and tweaked, don't keep silent. Keeping silent meaning you're accepting the fact that, okay, I'm not gonna be making an impact. It's better for them to actually create it. No, stop, no. You have your own ideas, pitch it in. If they take it in, good thing. If not, probably there's a better thing. It's a learning for you as well, learning for everyone as well. 3, taking action. Whatever you see that you think needs to be changed or tweaked, you have to put action into it. Collaborate with your team, you yourself, you have your idea, you have your team, you have everyone. Because I think for women ourselves, it starts within us. We have to be confident as well, starting from us, so it grows and goes outside of everyone, right? Because we can't give out recommendations and just wait for it to come and help us out. We have to start it already. So when I said balance hiring from the start, externally, and to Grace's point, we wanted, of course, efficiency across, right? So we balance the hiring of incoming new hires and then hone the current ones. So it all starts with our ideas, how we take action, and how we become visible, not just in our companies inside of it, but also external, like this kind of panel. So thank you, Dr. Shiva.
Yeah, so like I was saying, if we hire right and we groom right and with the right intent, I think the intent is extremely important. What is the intent that we are grooming with? And when we're grooming them right, all of the points that Camille mentioned, being visible, having a voice, just having a seat on the table, I think that itself helps with all kinds of diversity, not just for women, but anyone and everyone who's been feeling not heard. That's really important. But I do want to make a segue of this into my favorite aspect of inclusion. And we talk a lot about unconscious bias. We talk a lot about the fact that we do a lot of things unconsciously. Now, with the kind of consciousness that we have, we do a lot of things towards one segment very consciously, completely forgetting the other ones. For example, we had in one of the teams that I used to handle, we had very structured rosters, and there was a 9 to 5 shift, there was an 11 to 7 shift, and then there was a 2 to 11 shift. And typically the guys in the 2 to 11 shift, they would get rostered there, or like I said, single women, or people who who were living alone, who were on their own, and the ones with the family and all of that, the 9 to 5 shift kind of gotten done. And, it was a roster change. And after 3 months of one of my team members, who's now one of my best friends, she came up to me and said, just because I'm single, you think I don't need evenings off? I was like, no, what happened? She says, the roster is supposed to change every month. Just because I don't have a mother-in-law, a sick child at home, or a family to look after, I may just want to go home and sit in front of the TV and do nothing. I deserve it. And that stuck with me, that in order to be so accommodating with the others, you kind of forget that there is a reverse to it as well. And sometimes we totally forget that. And this applies a lot when we are looking men versus women, where we become extra sensitive because we are trying to be inclusive towards the women and forget that men can have the same problems, right? So let's talk about reverse bias. And I'll go to Krupa with a full circle there. Krupa, what do you think? Are we at this point in time getting so inclusive that we are getting non-inclusive in some ways?
So one of your points very rightly said, in our swing, or in that mood of us trying to do something, anything that's thrust upon or done with force, we kind of tend to overdo things at times without trying to realize where is that line, right? It can be intentional, or sometimes it's not, because if it's not driven through a DNA, obviously we need to drive this value. So I think what's extremely important is, are we really, it's just not about the management trying to be bought into this whole thing, but like how Grace mentioned, are the managers, are we really giving them that kind of training and coaching, and how do we really look at things in a balanced manner? Because anything you overdo, because there are times there are managers who want to follow it strictly to the T because they know their higher ups are watching them. So in this melee, either they try to be too nice to everybody, and therefore they don't want to take in, the wrath of any of the employees for any future litigations or issues. So they just be good to everyone. That still doesn't solve the purpose. Or we have people who come in and say, hey, what's happening? The men definitely, I'm just taking as a classic example. We talk about our promotion systems, we talk about our performance appraisal systems. The expectation is a fair and a transparent communication. And end of everything else, merit should be supreme. While we give equal opportunities to people, we tend to give an extra support, or I would say equity. For example, if you're looking at working young mothers, what can we do? Can we give them flexi hours, etc.? All of it to support them cope up with the other beautiful challenges they have in life. But end of it all comes down to, do they bring the merit onto the table for us to look at it, so that that's when all your policies also gain tremendous respect from the organization. Yes, so yes, it's more voluntary by nature, but to become voluntary, there has to be a lot of education. education over a period of time, not that it's a instructor-led training of 24 hours and then somebody's going to turn over, not going to happen. Over a period of time, groups being created, more conversations with people, and that's how this change can happen. If we then just pull out between 2 years ago, your performance appraisal system analytics versus this year, you want to take a look at it over, can we see the metrics? What kind of people were promoted? How has your appraisal ratings typically been? How have your managers flared in terms of giving the feedback to their employees? These are the things that will just give you from data to actually meaningful analytics if we have moved that path. And I'm sure it can be just a 5% improvement, but there is a movement. So this is how I will look at it. Nothing trust works. It has to be very, very into your.
And nothing trust works because somewhere or the other you let it slip. My son works in Canada, and there was this one day he called me up very, very distraught. He said, I'm the top performer of my team, but somebody just called me a diversity hire. And I'm very upset about it. So I was like, okay, so diversity hire, you have to be, so are you saying that you're being hired because you're an Indian? He says, yeah, that's what they told me, that you've been hired because you're an Indian and not because, retained because of what you're doing. So, the right matrices to be hired and to be retained, I think those are very important pieces. Grace, you wanted to pitch in on this as well. And I'll come to you, Nairi, next.
Yes, Deepti. Very quickly, adding to what Kripa was talking about, right? While, yes, there are processes, policies, we're going to check for parity, a lot of things can happen proactively. There's one more thing that I'd like to share in this forum, which is, when we're talking agile in terms of looking at what the client wants and then really, having your charter aligned to that. Likewise, right? Often I think we need to listen to the words that are not spoken, right? Having a ear to the ground, because a lot of times what can happen in organizations is not everybody is vocal enough to say that they feel they are being treated differently or they're being ignored and stuff like that. A lot of times these voices are unheard, right? Because they don't speak up. So it's very important to have a ear to the ground and really ensure, if we are truly talking inclusion, truly talking eliminating biases and then reverse biases and stuff like that, it's important to listen to these voices, the words that are not being spoken, right? Gesture, people's engagement levels, right? A lot of things that you can observe, which will really give you cues as to how well or not are you doing in the diversity inclusion space overall, right? So I think that's very important, especially for leaders, managers to have a ear to the ground, because then it allows us to reprioritize things, readjust according to the need of the hour.
Absolutely, you're bang on that. Ear to the ground, extremely important. Camille mentioned that we need to give them a platform to talk, but the reverse is also true, that not everyone is vocal, and the only place that you get to hear of everything is on Glassdoor. So then you're like, oh my God, really? If you were going through this, why didn't you just tell us? And they don't. So yes, very good point that we need to have our ear to the ground. Nairi, any thoughts on reverse bias?
Yes, sure. First of all, I do want to acknowledge that I didn't actually introduce myself when I spoke the first time. So I do apologize for that, ladies. So I am the Workforce Planning Advisor for Energy Queensland in Australia, and I'm currently working as the Customer Operations Team Leader as well. So that's my background. I've got about 13 years in the workforce planning field and about 20 years in corporate business in general. So regarding reverse bias, I don't want to repeat what Grace and Krupa have said, of course, very great points. What I just wanted to share, like from my perspective, when you've got an organisation which has got the policies and the processes in place to create the framework and structure to enable diversity and inclusion genuinely, it comes down to that leadership development piece, which enables a mature leadership workforce that can actually deliver that genuine approach, so that we don't have instances like your example with the diversity hire, for example. That's what we don't want. Emotional intelligence in a leader and enabling that by creating that leadership development framework is critical, because it's often not, it's what's not spoken, which is the loudest message. And being able to package that together with leadership development, emotional intelligence, having a structure and a framework there to enable diversity and inclusion, but putting it all together and creating that individual style leadership so that we can deliver on this, which is fundamentally required. And as I mentioned earlier, this conversation needs to be maintained, because this is a focus that we always need to have our attention on, so that the ball isn't dropped in the future, and so that the women that come after us are not moving backwards or are not held back because of the actions that we do or don't take.
Yeah, and you know, when we talk about the actions that we don't take, I like what you said right at the end, which is the actions that we don't take, and goes a lot with what we've been discussing, that unless we have the right kind of right kind of conversations with the people, top down, with our managers, with our employees, get them to the right understanding, there will be points and actions that we will not even think of. And again, like, suddenly you'll get to hear of all of these actions that you've not taken on Glassdoor. And that's really unfortunately become the forum for everyone to let their heart out. So if we have the right conversations, I think we will be able to sound people off well in advance. Okay, so I really like how the discussion is going. Don't have any more questions on the Q&A. So let's move on to something more, gender and what does inclusion mean. Where I'm coming from, let me just talk about this. Today, social media, I'm not sure how many of you are kind of aligned to the social media pieces that are going on about what we identify as, right? And there is a lot of conversation about I identify as this, and therefore I am a certain gender or not a gender. There is a lot of flack that people are giving on this, and there is a lot of confusion on how do we treat this. You know, it started with male, female, and the third sex. Now it's become, when we talk about the third sex, there is an entire gamut there, which to be honest, I also don't understand. I mean, every time I need to go back and check Google on what does this mean and what does that mean, and is this any different from A, B, and C? Now, the same applies to people with disabilities as well. So what I'm trying to say here is that your resources and your diversity has a very large scope right now. So what are the steps that we can take in terms of educating not just ourselves? We've already established that our middle management and our team leader level, executive level people, we really need to educate them. But what are the means that we can adapt or utilize to educate our workforce far better about the changing concepts in the world? And if I could just add to this, the reason I'm bringing this up is because when the POSH law in India came out, which was about anti-sexual harassment against women in the workplace, the first reaction that happened was, I'm not going to hire any more women because they may start to scream sexual harassment, right? And that was really the reaction that came out from a lot of people, whether it was men or women. Right now, I'm hearing things where it's very difficult to hire people because you don't know how to treat them. It's clearer when it is man or woman or the third sex. How do I treat them? Right? That's where I'm coming from, that the confusion is everywhere. So how can we educate ourselves better? Let's talk to Francia about this.
Yeah, sure. I'll position it in, I would look at it on practices that help our organization build a diverse workforce. I know you mentioned about education. It's still number one on my list. It's to really educate our leaders, because our leaders will be instrumental for DEI efforts. At the end of the day, it's our leaders who are in front of our employees. The second for me is, creating an inclusion council. So ideally, the council should be involved in goal settings, around hiring, retaining, advancing diverse workforce in the organization, also addressing in employee engagement problems and underrepresented employees in the company. I would also focus on celebrating employee differences. So for me, it's also very important that to show our employees that we respect their background, their tradition, and we practice that by recognizing them in the organization. And lastly, I know you mentioned that earlier about listening to our employees. That is to better understand experience. Employee surveys has been a practice in most of the organization, and also focus group discussion to really drill down on engagement and inclusion issues. But conducting a comprehensive assessment of your organization's demographics and people, it really creates, and it also helps us develop strategic priorities to promote inclusiveness in any company.
Yeah, I saw a lot of nods when you talked about the fact that having diversity councils, having more like-minded people focused towards a particular goal. Can you highlight a little more about what the Diversity Council typically would be involved in?
Sure. So probably I can highlight one because I am an active sponsor of one of the councils in our organization. So for me to make it effective, the councils should be as diverse as possible, with members representing not only in different ethnicities or genders, but also different business functions on different geographic locations, and really tapping on individuals not only coming from a C-suite level, but also at all grade levels. So this council forms and really identifying what are the issues and how can we align these issues towards DEI, towards employee engagement, so that we can have that inclusivity in the company.
Fantastic. And like I said, when you have diversity and inclusion as a broad spectrum, let's go from point A to point B, and include everything in it. It just goes a little crazy, and sustaining it becomes a problem. But when you have a group of people focusing on something, it just makes it easier to activate and sustain. So thanks, Francia. Priya, over to you. What's the best way to keep ourselves abreast and educated with all the changes that are happening, in the society?
I think I would like to borrow the point of what Francia mentioned. I think it won't like one size fits all for everyone, right? So I think we all know what it is in terms of how do we create more awareness to people. Maybe they know it, but I think the frequent reiterations in smaller forums definitely help. And how can that be, demonstrated? For me, I think it's not about saying, but it's also about doing, right? What you do and what you say should be one or the same. So I firmly believe in that. As a leader, it's very important that saying is not the only thing, but we also demonstrate the doing part of it. And again, when you see, and people will start believing in it, right? As simple as the culture that we want to bring is feel free to speak your mind, right? I liked the point that Grace mentioned about you need to give the ear. I think that is what is all. It's all boiling down to when you give the ear. When you give the ear to hear them, you can actually find out a lot of the challenges that you have. So we have something called Let's Talk, right? We have created something called Let's Talk. There's no agenda, nothing. You come and say, it's a forum that we have created by the people, and these are all millennial kids. So they come and, meet, let's say once in a month, and then they create a forum to come and say, you want to talk about something, come, let's talk, right? And this is again, we gave a clear thing that you guys manage it. We're going to say, we're not going to come and say, hey, these are 1, 2, 3 things that we want to reach. Our objectives are this, so on and so forth. But you make it, how can we make it a very inclusive place, right? And again, these are representation from business and young kids and very, very different set of people from different geographies. And also, how can we more educate people in a different form? So today, everything is in mobile, and they don't want to sit in a 90 minutes classroom session, or let's say they don't want to, everything is just about 90 seconds. If it's not a 90 minutes, it's just about 90 seconds. And you got to put that capsule or a bite-sized kind of a thing that you want to communicate. So we ran a campaign saying that, hey, D&I week, and when we did the celebrations, a lot of things came in, which was very surprising, very interesting. And for us to also, especially for me, to reflect and say, how can we make it even more inclusive? And there are something that we hear you, and how can we sort of address it? I think it all boils down to listening to them, to listening to what they have to say, and making a culture to make it an inclusive workplace. I think that's my takeaway.
And just listening to them, I think somewhere, if we start with the fact that we acknowledge the difference, that now when I look at us, a lot of us here are 20 years in the corporate world. Maybe our learning style has been very different. I love to sit in a training room and listen to a facilitator talk and play games with us and everything. And the same thing when I even talk to my son and talk about learning, he's like, I'm doing this online thing and I hate it. It's 45 minutes long. And for the life of me, I can't understand that 45 minutes long, that too online training, what's the big deal? But if we would just acknowledge the difference, that the way we learned, or the way the people who are generations now are changing with 10 years, even maybe shorter periods of time, where people are changing the way they learn, the people are changing the way they look at the world itself. If we would just start acknowledging that you and I are different, that's when we will start listening. Yes, Priya, you have a point.
I just wanted to add one point. Sorry, I missed that. So I think the learning by itself is now become more like a gamification, right? Everything is like, so, and again, these are modules that is like, you play it and then you do it for the next day. So we are trying to, it gone are those days, Deepti, where people want to do two days, full day workshop. And I'm sorry, they're like, we're trying to tell them to foster a culture that, hey, buddy, go and do your module for the day. It's like this, and they prefer to do a everything gamified so that everything is in the phone and they enjoy what they want to do. So I think that's where it's all heading to, and we should see how can we even more, the challenges that we are spread across everywhere, remotely working, how can we make it even more inclusive at workplace?
Yeah.
That's
And
what.
and this kind of learning doesn't only apply to larger things, simple bite-sized pieces. An impact that a reel of 30 seconds has on, I'd like to say younger generation, but no, I wouldn't like to say. I mean, I feel a younger generation still. But the impact.
We're all part of the generation too.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
We shouldn't say that we are. Maybe we should say we are more seasoned than them. That's all.
I like the seasoned part of it. Yeah, so the way that that 30 seconds, the kind of impact that can have, I think. In fact, I was making a reel on some conversation. I'm a major body positivity, so to speak, activist or a conversationalist, and I was trying to make that, and my son comes in and says, 90 seconds, who's going to listen to you for 90 seconds? Make it shorter. I'm like, okay. And I guess that's where the difference is. Just acknowledging that there is a difference, I think, is the start point of everything. So as we are nearing the end of the entire conversation, I'd like to wrap up towards the end. But what I want to talk about now is, and this is a question for all of you, give me one point on where organizations succeed in DEI and belongingness objectives, and two, why do they fail? And this is a quick rapid round for all of you. Let's start with Camille. I missed out on her the last time, so let's start with Camille.
So I think diversity is already here in us currently in all aspects. We just have to have the acceptance of it and the knowledge, of course, across, right? It's not just gender and ethnicity and whatnot, but in all aspects, it's already here. It's more of inclusivity that's what we need to establish, right? But for us to be able to establish that and have it concretized is for us to recognize, of course, as you've mentioned, the difference, right? Though we are always pushing for equality for men and women, equality across everything, what really is equality? We really have differences all along, right? So a female have different strengths and weaknesses. Men have the same too. So we have to recognize that one. In other aspects, younger generations have their strengths, their weaknesses. Mid generation have their strengths and weaknesses as well. So basically, we have to really recognize that one, and we have to balance everything else for us to be able to achieve what we really wanted to achieve on inclusivity. Diversity is already there. We just have to get the knowledge on that. The platforms, again, differences. So there's got to be a group chat or a call or a face-to-face or really just a quick touch base. So it depends really on people. So that's the point where we're going to be able to be successful. And that's also where we're going to fail. We're not able to recognize and make an impact and take some action on that differences that we're going to be foreseeing. That's on my end.
Thank you, Camille. Going back to you, Kripa.
Yeah. So the first question, why do, all of these initiatives at times, why does it fail? If you really look at it, I would say fatigue, overdoing of things, and sometimes getting lost in the whole valley of what suits you versus what's happening in the industry. So can we keep things simple, very relevant to your organization? And then, as I told you at the beginning, taking on a fewer things, but sustaining it. And most important, what I really feel is the whole employee value proposition today. When you're looking at diversity, it can be a lot more wholesome. If you're bringing in more with the look of an employee value proposition that looks fair, that looks equal opportunity for all, and at the same time supporting people who really need that little extra effort there on, but then ensuring all of them are in this particular journey rather than calling it a race, and growing up for themselves and building the organization. One as an organization, two as an organization brand, whether it's to do with stability, is a kind of work-life balance. Of course, compensation, I mean, it's always said, but the whole empathy, respect, what we look at, if that can be looked at more as a value proposition to people, I'm sure we will be successful.
Okay.
That's it in a nutshell.
Great thoughts. Great thoughts. Nairi, over to you.
I just think we need to really embrace that equity is where it is at, not equality. Equality is one of the, of course, the outcomes and the benefits, but if we focus on equity and make sure that we can accommodate the individual, as well as work within the framework and the structure that we can, that is created for us, so that we can maximize the use of resources, for example, while accommodating individual needs, that will enable a firm but fair approach to, progress in the workplace and really enabling that equity and equality.
Awesome. Awesome. Yes. Grace, over to you.
Thank you. And yes, to your question, why do organizations succeed? While I think everybody talked about most of the things that were on my mind, but a couple of additions from my end is, one, I think when every single individual in the organization has this as their charter, right? And it doesn't become a one-time event, a one person's agenda. And you're not doing something because you see competition doing this, right? Everybody's painted green, so I want to be painted green. That's not going to work, right? So I think that's how organizations will succeed, when every single one of them in the organization thinks this is their charter, and in this whole journey. Now, why do organizations fail? I would say lack of consistency. Right, because we all roll out programs. Okay, March is when Women's Day, we talk women. What happens in July? Right? Okay, if there's a Mother's Day, then a little bit of women happens with those who are mothers. But I'm just saying, somewhere, consistency is key. If organizations are consistently consistent at their D&I approach, they're not going to fail. Otherwise, they will. That's from me. Thank you, Deepti.
Great points there, and I will sum this up. Francia, over to you. Success and failure, why do they?
Sure. Yep. So DEI initiatives are now, I would say, playing a growing role in enterprise transformation globally. And majority have recognized that to create a diverse and inclusive workplace, we have to focus our efforts in promoting fair and equitable opportunities to new and different, talent pool. And I have seen companies that are also stepping up in hiring chief diversity officers and other management roles that are really task specific on DEI, which really drives DEI culture on those companies. And on your other question, particularly on why do other companies fail in efforts around DEI, I would highlight two things. I'll start first in the lack of buy-in from leadership. I always believe the successful program starts with the support from the CEO, and they can show this support through a clear business, understanding or business model that really emphasizes on DEI, and continuously reiterating the objectives around it. The second one is having unclear goals. So some companies do not align their DEI strategy with their key business priorities, and for me, they should aim to achieve in concise or specific goals that all managers and employees can recite specific on DEI.
Okay, thank you, Francia. Priya, over to you.
All right, so I think the success part of it truly, what I believe is the dialogue or the conversation that you can have with the employee on two aspects. One, like I mentioned, the perception and the real-time experiences what they go through. And the second one is, if they feel that their concerns are being heard and that is being addressed. So those are two things. And I think it's also important, I don't know if we covered that piece, that people managers are also equally important, right? They are also, in a way, the HR managers who are there managing the people, and they need to be, the managers have to be developed too, in terms of how do you sort of, build this inclusive culture, embrace the equity, bringing that sense of belongingness within the team. Because I think managers development is also equally important, and that they play a very pivotal role, in an organization success in terms of demonstrating the behaviors. And for me, failure, I think, it could be like, don't overdo. I think that's what Kripa mentioned. Make it very, very simple and relevant and purposeful, whether what suits your organization. It need not be, one size fits all, and that will definitely work for me, may not work for the other thing. And make it very, very something that is doable, right? Don't overkill, and don't exaggerate and sort of not able to achieve what we want to achieve. But I think if we are able to deliver what we have told and what we are mentioned, and able to demonstrate that, I think that will itself place the success story for ourselves as an organization.
Thank you, Priya, and absolutely wonderful thoughts from all of you. And I do see a commonality in the way we are progressing with D&I. So if I just could sum up everything, we talked a lot about the fact that the landscape has changed. It's gone from being just about equality, but about equity and about belongingness. That's where we are right now. And these are not just words. These are concepts that are translating to where we are today. The way people are in the society, that itself is changing. And if we would just acknowledge the fact that all of us are different, different generations, different ways of thinking, different ways of learning, I think those are extremely important when we talk about landscape. What makes us successful is for us to have very concentrated goals, which talk more about the core of the company. What they're deep-seated in the values and the policies of the company. Only then will we be able to achieve what we want to in DEI. Listening, stronger, having your ear to the ground, like we keep talking about. Listening harder, giving a platform for people to speak. Those are some of the ways in which we can understand what is really happening. In terms of goals, when we talked about goals, doing less is more, like we spoke about. Do a few things, but do them consistently, and do it in a manner that's sustainable. We go all out, big guns blaring and all of that. But what really happens by another 2-3 months, 6 months down the line is all of it fizzles out and we really are left with nothing. So, so less is more. Pick on your top priorities, maybe 1 or 2, max 3, and spend all your time in achieving those. Those I feel that's I think what we came out with today in our conversation, and I thank you all for all your passionate for this passionate conversation that we had today. I really did enjoy moderating this, so thank you very much, and thank you, Shiva, for the opportunity to do that. So over to you, and thank you to all the ladies. You've been a great panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepti. We enjoyed it as well. Thank you for moderating.
Thank you, Krupa, Priya, Francia, Grace, Nari, and Kemil for taking your valuable time from the office hours and sharing your insights and a great conversation. In fact, I myself have learned a lot. I'm sure that audience would have also. And this is going to be published on our social media. I'm sure that thousands of people are going to watch this and gain great takeaways from the conversations. Yes. Thanks again for your valuable time and perspectives, experiences, and insights. Thoroughly enjoyed. And Women's Day is every day, not in the month of March. We celebrate every day, and you're being the active drivers in the business, and anything is possible that people are really driving impossible.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Cheers.
Thank you so much, Priya.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thanks, everyone.
Once
Bye-bye.
again, Grace, Ari, Kemal. Thank you.
Thank you.